another session of The Final Mile by Freight 360, where we answer your questions. We appreciate you guys sending us everything, whether it's a YouTube comment or a question through our website at freight360.net or an email, info@freight360.net. We've got a bunch of good questions today, but please, to support us, please check out our sponsors, DAT for a free month of the DAT One Load Board, Blue Book Services for credit and sales information on the lumber and produce industry, and Lean Solutions Group for all of your staffing needs. Ben, we got some good ones today, man. You want to get right into it or what?
Yeah, let's chop it up.
All right. Our first question: as a new freight broker, what is the best CRM to use? Well, I will say the first answer is you should be using something. I started off using legitimately an Excel spreadsheet, that and like a pen and paper. What about you? Well, you probably have one with your company, right?
Correct. Like I have a CRM and I use it. I use HubSpot. I also have spreadsheets of company names, and like other people within our company will pull like lead lists for me based on categories. And then I will take them off that Excel sheet and I will literally just add them into my CRM as I'm contacting them. Because the problem with Excel sheets, and again, yes, you can put any amount of information in there, is what it doesn't do for you is it doesn't remind you later. And it also doesn't have a good interface to be able to see who you've contacted already and who you're following up with.
Yeah.
And then you end up and the one problem, most people don't think much about it, is actually having to choose or decide is actually a very high effort task for your brain. And you don't think a lot about it. But like when you're doing that all day prospecting, trying to decide who you're going to call next, you end up spending more time actually trying to choose than you do actually dialing. And this can also be seen, like there's programs called like Call Fire is one I know that a couple of my clients use, but there's a few
like an auto dialer.
Yeah, they're auto dialers where you can dump your leads in and it will just keep dialing and you'd be amazed at how many more prospects you talk to when you use a system like that. And I first learned that point, right, when I would sit next to people that were really fast dialing a phone, right? They're literally dialing the next number. As they're hanging up on a call, they've already clicked the next lead and they're dialing that number as they're wrapping up the last call. And if you looked at their call numbers at the end of the day, like they would always have like 20% more numbers than the average of the office. And you start to realize that like, even though it doesn't seem like it matters, if you're doing this every day, getting 10 or 20% more efficient at this job means you're that much faster to getting to money, right? Or to more money or to growth, right? So those are huge.
You mentioned HubSpot. I personally use HubSpot now. I've been using it for probably 6 or 7 years. I love it. And one of the things you mentioned, so you can call out of HubSpot, which I think is cool, but you mentioned auto dialer. And one of the things I like about HubSpot, when you can set like tasks, basically like a to-do list, is if I've got all my tasks for today and I have them ranked by, time zone, or I have whatever order I want to do these tasks in, if it's by time or by whatever else, you can press like start tasks and it'll pull up your first one right away. And I've got my notes. I can click call, blah, blah, blah. And then once I'm done, I can complete the task after my notes are in there and it automatically pulls up the next one and it pulls up right on my screen, that contact, and boom, I'm right after it. They have a free version too, because you can get it for free. I think for like $50 a month, you can get like the basic sales one, but you can pay $1,000 a month or more if you get their full like marketing suite and email campaign manager and all that stuff. But I really love HubSpot.
Yeah, I've used Zoho and I've used Pipedrive, all in freight brokerage. I think they're both decent products. I mean, if someone out there is using them, I think they are good. One of the main reasons why I liked HubSpot is one of the things you mentioned, but also I also feel like it's got more capabilities if I choose to utilize them later. And that's one of the big selling points for me. And I also just really like the interface because, again, most of the CRMs out there will pretty much give you the same functionality, but my preference is definitely at HubSpot, and I've been using it for everything.
I want to make another quick couple points on the CRM. If you work for a brokerage as a W-2, there's a high likelihood that you don't really have a choice. Yes. You might be forced to use whatever CRM is in there, built inside of their TMS platform. You might have to be tagging companies to your name or customers, prospects to your name, things like that, entering notes in there so a sales manager could see if you're actively still working them. The other thing, and I want to come back to Excel here, is Excel is a great way to back up your contacts as a secondary method. Because think about this. If you go to leave a company or if you're thinking about leaving a company and you start doing massive like data extraction from their system, they might have some like flags in place to go off like,
Yeah.
hey, Joe over there just exported all of his prospects and customers from the last 36 months and emailed them from his company account to his personal Gmail. So having just a little backup there, that way you're not doing anything that raises any flags if, you're trying to mass pull data out. The same thing happens, I've heard, with like people exporting like reports and stuff like that on like customer sales and commissions. It's like, hey, what did you pull that report for? So
Yeah,
it's being smart.
I had assistants that were let go for that. They had found that they were forwarding like my leads and things about my account to their own Gmail accounts. And well, at
Yeah.
least one, I remember, I think maybe even two actually got let go for that. The other thing I want to point out is if you are using a CRM, connect it to your email. Because
Yes.
one of the best things about that is that when you're talking to a contact, you can see like what you just referenced. Like anytime I go into a contact and I go to call them, I can see under activity every email that they've ever sent and I've sent to them. I can see when they've opened it sometimes if they didn't opt out. But I can also see what they've emailed me back forever, all the time, without having to enter that into another system from my email. And again, when you're prospecting, it's phone calls and emails, and it's very disjointed and hard to understand every bit of the conversation you had with this prospect if it's not all in one place.
Yep.
Again, I also recommend if you can attach your phone to it as well. I know there's difference in phone recordings, but if you got that capability, I really like it because I also think it's great for coaching. If you are recording your phone calls and they are housed in your CRM, it's very helpful for somebody helping you get better at your job to be able to pull calls and listen to them with you and go through questions that could have been phrased differently, framed better, tones of voice, everything. Like that's
Yep.
what we used to practice on the most.
Yeah.
We would pull call records every week at the end of the week, me and my buddy, and we'd just beat each other up over it. He'd pull his, I'd pull mine, and we'd just give each other shit. And that's how you get better. Like somebody pointing out the things you don't notice.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Another thing too with CRM, like any other software vendor that's out there, don't just have one call with one vendor and sign up. Like try a few
Yeah.
out at a minimum, but always be open. Like so even not CRM related, but there's a vendor that had sent a marketing email out to our company this either I think it might have been Friday or over the weekend or Monday. I don't know. But it kind of piqued my interest. It had something to do with like auto rating things based off of pricing from DAT paired up with my parameters. So it basically I could throw like a quote request in, and it would basically it learns what my preference is on X, Y, and Z, and it can spit back recommended quotes. And I was like, So then I hop on a demo with this guy this week, and I find out they've got way more other cool tools and products that are really good for freight brokerage. They got EDI integration stuff that helps you set up EDI very simply and quickly, API integration stuff that's, takes a lot of the headache out. And I'm like, I'm really glad that I even checked it out because I'm like, we already have this. I've already got that. But I always like to take a quick, brief demo with a new vendor just to see if maybe there's something there that is better than what I have. Like back to CRM, I love HubSpot. But if a new one comes out, like for example, Paul
Shipper
Freight Carrier has
CRM.
got Shipper CRM, right? If he
Yep.
gets that to a point where I know he's still in beta mode, but later this year, if it gets to a point that's like really strong and that could potentially be far superior for a freight broker because it's freight and transportation centric. That's what it's focused on. So
Yep.
always keep your options open. You're not married to it forever. All right. Our next question. I like this one. I've been getting mixed guidance regarding the FMCSA guidance that came out in November 2022 and revised in June 2023, indicating that independent dispatchers that work for multiple carriers are now considered to be a broker. Is this correct? Well, I want to address a couple things here. Are they being considered a broker? No, you're not granted like your authority or anything. They're saying that and we'll unpack it here in a second. But basically, what they're saying is some of the activities that these independent dispatchers are doing would require you to have a brokerage authority in order to do them legally under the current guidelines of the FMCSA. Another thing, these are guidelines. These are not laws that have been put into place from the Department of Transportation. This is the FMCSA taking their first steps after being hounded by brokers and saying, here's how we're putting out our initial guidance. We're going to revise it. Here's how we're interpreting what this independent dispatching surge and this new thing that's become so popular the last couple of years. Here's how we're going to kind of define what they're doing and how that fits into our licensing process. Because if you're a broker or a forwarder or a motor carrier, right, NVOCC, you've got to have a certain license. And with that comes a requirement to have a surety bond or insurance or both. So the independent dispatchers, well, here, let me just kind of pull up what it says here. So one of the examples was, and we did a pretty deep dive on this in one of our recent episodes. So take a look back into our library, you'll find it. But let me just read this here. The FMCSA offered two example. Okay, so they use the phrase bona fide agent. So if a bona fide agent only represents one carrier, it will assign all loads it sources to that one carrier. So there's no dispute that the agent is not a broker. Okay, so if you're an independent dispatcher, you're contracted by a trucking company, your job is to go find them loads. Boom, totally legal. Now, however, an agent representing multiple carriers should be careful to structure its agreements to avoid the possibility of allocating traffic. So when they say allocating traffic, we as brokers can do that. We could take a load from our customer and say, I want to put it on this carrier. No, I want to put it on that carrier. And I have the choice. I'm going to assign and allocate that traffic. Said in one example, one carrier the agent works with requires the agent to source loads originating only in the Northeast, and the other carrier requires loads sourced in the Southeast. The agent would not need to exercise discretion because all loads originating in a particular geographical location would necessarily be assigned to the relevant carrier. So there's no conflict here, right? This one carrier is going to take loads from over here. This other carrier is going to take loads from over there, right? As an independent dispatcher, you're not allocating traffic and deciding which carrier you want to use. You basically have it in contract that I'm going to source this kind of freight in this area for this carrier and vice versa for the other carrier. Further on, let's see here. The other example involves carriers requiring specific types of loads that don't overlap. Hazmat was one great example of that. So one carrier is a hazmat carrier, another carrier is not hazmat, so they're going to source hazmat commodity loads to one and not the other. The whole thing here is you can't be an independent dispatcher, as the guidance says, for, let's say, 8 trucking companies that all have the same equipment and can all haul the same freight, which is how things have been operating quite a bit in the last handful of years. And there has been some benefit to that, but there's also been some nefarious activity with it. So that being said, if you are an independent dispatcher, read their guidance from 2023. It's from last month, and make sure that you're not doing anything like that. And if you are, be prepared for any legislation or actual law that comes out about this. Do you remember anything else in that ruling, or not that ruling, but that guidance?
No, it's really based on the discretion piece. I'm looking at it again too as you were going through it, and it's like, if you have the ability to make the choice, then by that definition, you need a license. Basically, like, if there aren't criteria outside of your opinion as to determining which load goes to which carrier, then you're a broker. Like, to your point, a really good litmus test is if all of your carriers operate in the same areas or everywhere and all can and will haul the same types of commodities, and every time you get another load, you have to make a choice as to which one is the best fit, then you are now brokering freight and need a license. The question I have that they don't really, and I don't want to muddy the waters, but I'm going to anyway, is, well, theoretically, I might have 5 carriers and say they're all, one driver, one truck, and only one guy is in Tennessee right now. Like, I mean, technically, I don't really have a choice. That's the only guy I can find a load for in Tennessee. Does that mean I'm a broker or a dispatcher now? Because geography, to your point, doesn't mean they only stay in it. It could be referring to wherever they happen to be, right? So in that case, you're not really choosing the trucks. You're still
Yeah.
only finding loads for whoever is where. And I'm guessing that's what's happening with lots of dispatchers, right? They work with a few carriers, they find loads and backhauls when guys get stuck. They're doing the same job for each of them. And it's probably not very likely that two of your drivers are ever in the same city on the same day at the same time that need the same load. So it kind of doesn't really help you there.
Well, so I have a couple thoughts. One of them is I got a few thoughts here. One situation is the FMCSA would probably what sounds like they'd be okay with an independent dispatching service that represents, let's say, a dry van fleet, a reefer fleet, a flatbed fleet, a
Yes.
hotshot fleet, box truck fleet, right? Different types of trucks. So that way, if they've got a solid one or two brokerages that they work with and say, hey, I've got connections with really good capacity in this niche area with all these different equipment types, I can help you out with all different kinds of freight that you've got. I think that's how they want to have it done. Now, another thought I have is, how are they going to be able to prove any of this if they're trying to say someone's not following this guidance? And third is, this is, I think, where the danger of violating this guidance is. A dispatcher, if they've got, let's say, 7 or 8 carriers or owner operators that are all in the same area, all potentially available, all have the right equipment type, who are they going to work with? They're going to take the driver who's going to give them the biggest cut. So if they get a percentage from one, a flat rate from another, a higher flat rate from another, they're going to weigh all those out and they're going to allocate traffic to whoever pays them the best, when in fact that truck may not be the best qualified carrier for that load. So they're
And
making a
that's brokering.
decision which can impact the brokerage and, more importantly, the customer. And the reason that us as brokers have to be licensed is because we're acting as an intermediary on behalf of our shipper between them and the motor carrier out there. And adding another party in there kind of muddies the water. So we'll
Yep.
see what happens. I don't think a lot will happen. I mean, dude, double brokerage for the last 10 years, like nothing's been done about it. So I don't know. We'll see.
We will
All
see.
right. What's our next question here?
I would like a sales script to talk to truck drivers about dispatching their trucks.
So I remember when this one came in, you replied to the guy that sent it in. Do you remember this one or no?
I do not, but I'm guessing this is somebody that has a dispatching service and they want to bring in more clients.
So this is what I'm not sure about, right? A sales script to talk to drivers about dispatching their trucks. My initial thought when I read it was the guy is a broker and wants to find a way to sell to a carrier to get capacity out of them. That's the way that I read it. So I guess, first of all, I'm not going to give you a sales script, but what are some tips that you can use to build relationships with carriers to try and get access to their capacity? Because here's a truth, right? Not every available truck is posted on DAT and Truck Stop. They're just not, right? Some of them will use the load boards and they'll just, they won't post the truck, but they'll search for loads that are available. But even more often, direct relationships, right? The ideal brokerage situation is when you have a load from a customer and you don't have to post anything or call a random truck that has a truck posted. You just call one of your go-to preferred carriers and boom, you're good to go. So what are some ways to build those relationships up? It's the same way you prospect a customer. Call, introduce yourself, try to figure out what kind of loads do they want to haul? What kinds of facilities do they like to go pick up and deliver to? Things like that.
Yeah, you want to start with their needs, not yours. And again, if we're talking about this in the frame of like, how do I sell carriers on my customers' freight, right, to get them to want to run it with me? And what I'm selling them on are usually the efficiencies that they'll get or the value in running and doing business with me, right? One of which is usually like a long term relationship. Hey, if we can find a few loads to work on here or there, like I can go and literally work on your behalf, right? Like I will go find you business that works when I'm talking to people. Let me know your lanes. I'm already having conversations with people that you want to do business with. Let me know where you want to work. To your point, what lanes do you want to run? Where do you need to get back from? Where are you looking for backhauls? I can go and use that and leverage a customer to give me more business to give to you, right? So you're
Yep.
literally working on behalf of the carriers. So when I'm selling to them, you first need to understand, to Nate's point, what it is that they need, where they're going, and where their issues are that you can help resolve. When you get into higher level aspects, when you've got a customer, what you're selling them on is usually the efficiencies or what you've worked out with your customer and them to be able to determine to make it both work. What we talked about earlier, right? Hey, I got a
Yep.
carrier I know delivers to Miami every single week and deadheads up to Jacksonville or to Georgia to get a load to get home. I found a shipper that ships north from Miami. I am certainly using that, what that carrier told me. So it's a two-way street, right? Like, I not only sold the carrier on why he should work with me, I'm going to use that to now get a customer. And then once I get the customer, I'm going to go right back to the carrier and say, hey, I either got you exactly what you wanted, or maybe I have something that's not perfect, but close, and I'm going to sell him on the benefits based on what he told me his needs are. But every sale should
Yes.
start with understanding the needs of the person you're going to sell to, no matter what it is you're selling. I don't care if it's cars, air conditioners, insurance, life insurance, stock brokerage, it doesn't matter. You got to start with understanding your customer's needs. And in this case, it's a carrier, right? Or a
Yeah.
trucker.
So, and we'll go back to the way that you interpreted it. If let's say they're an independent dispatching service looking to get with carriers to be a dispatcher for them, it's the same answer.
Same
The
thing.
difference
Yep.
is, well, you still want to find out what that carrier is looking for, but instead, you are then also going to want to have a network of freight brokers that you've got a relationship with that hey, I've got access to freight in and out of these areas. But the answer essentially is the same. You want to find out what do they need and want, instead of, hey, give me access to your trucks. You know what I mean?
Pain points, right, for all carriers are almost always the same, right? It's time, it's profit on a load, the amount of money, the rate, which is an obvious one. But the third one is the efficiency and effectiveness, right? How short can you shrink the time to keep their wheels turning, because that means they're earning money. That's the value proposition as a dispatcher or a broker to a carrier.
Yep, exactly. It reminds me, you ever heard of the spin selling technique?
I have not.
So we actually, when I worked at Conway Freight, this was like sales 101. I had to pull it up to remember what it stood for, but it's the SPIN acronym stands for situation, problem, implication, and need payoff. So establish the buyer's current situation, identify problems the buyer faces, explore causes and effects of those problems, and show why your product is worth it. Which, I mean, that's kind of just sales in general. I think somebody wrote a book probably and just named it Spin and coined it their own term. But that was like literally like the adopted Conway Freight, now XPO. That was the like sales methodology that we used there. But it's
Works.
just kind of the same. You
Yeah.
figure out what are the pain points and how can you make those pain points go away. Good stuff. Okay, the last one here. How do I quote an RFP? Well, if you don't know what an RFP is, it's a request for proposal, request for pricing, sometimes an RFQ, request for quote or quotation, basically like a bid, right? Customer's going to say, I've got these lanes, give me your price on it. So a couple of tips. Well, actually, I'll give you a tool first. So, and I used it today, like I mentioned earlier on the podcast that came out on Friday. DAT's rate view. If you have the correct, it's not just part of their regular license. If you have the higher up license, you can use the multi-lane bidding option in there, and you get X amount of lanes you could run based on your license. It's if you have a larger brokerage or you go through a lot of bids, absolutely worth the investment to pay for it. You basically take a Excel sheet, they give you a template, and it shows you the right format, like origin, steady state zip for the destination and equipment type. And you can upload it in there, and then you tell it what you want it to give you as a return. Do you want it to spit out the prices in all-in flat rates? Do you want it as a rate per mile and then showing fuel surcharge? Do you want it to use current spot rates from the last 3, 7, or 30 days? Do you want it to forecast up to the future 12 months? There's all kinds of stuff you can do, and it can take a lot of the time out of the pricing part of it, so then you can focus on some other things. So that's a tool, but a strategy is don't try to do every lane on every bid. My recommendation is if you've got 500 lanes in a bid, look at the ones that Two things: have a high volume, so you have a good chance to actually participate and get awarded some of that business, but also look at where your strong carrier network has capacity available that you can actually leverage. And it doesn't matter if those are high density or lower mid density lanes. If you know you've got good quality capacity with your carrier network, talk to your carriers. Hey, I'm doing this bid. I want to help get this business so we can help award it to you guys for repeat business. What would rates look like? And then if you can get a quote from them, you go ahead, do the work, add your margin in, submit it, massage the relationship with the customer. Spend a lot of time in the bid process trying to build rapport by asking them things like, hey, how, is this bid how you guys have always done it? How many, is there multiple iterations? Do we get feedback on where we compared to everybody else? What are you guys really looking for? Are you just looking at price? Like, those are all the subjective things that if you can get under the hood, we talked about it on the last podcast as well, with talking more strategically with higher ups at a company, you'll get more information than just, hey, give me pricing. What do you think about the bid process?
I agree everything that you said with related to DAT. The thing about bids, right, is I always use them to get more than what they expect, right? Your customer uses this for budgeting purposes mostly. And the other thing they use it for, which is how they're going to actually send out business, is the thing that matters the most, right? So to your point, right, I always use them as a way to have a conversation where I can learn more about how they make their decisions than they want to tell me. Like that's the high level, like that's the pro level of working the bid, right? Like they just want you to put in numbers, send them back, and then they can just pick and choose the cheapest ones, right? But that doesn't help me, right? I might as well be a price taker, right? Like I don't have any control over the situation. I can't even influence it. So I'm going to use that bid always, all of the time. I don't care if it's 2 lanes. I don't care if it's 1 lane. I'm going to pick up the phone and call that customer. And the first things I'm going to ask her, hey, especially if it's a large one, hey, I need to give them something for them to give me something in return. I can't just call and be like, hey, tell me where I need to be on these lanes and expect them to give me like their target rates, right? So I'm going to use the same technique we talked about earlier. Hey, look, I've got a network of carriers and customers that are aligned with a few of these lanes. In fact, I think a few of them might be really good backhauls for my guys. Are any of these lanes problem lanes for you? Were they an issue last year? Do you expect them to be an issue this year? That is going to give me more information than they were willing to tell me. The second thing I'm going to ask about is, how does your bid system actually function, right? Is it a waterfall, meaning it goes to the cheapest, and if they don't accept it, it goes to the next cheapest, all the way on so on until eventually it becomes a spot load? Is this used primarily for budgeting? Are you guys going to tender freights? Are you contracting yearly on these numbers? Are you going to do that quarterly? Do you do it week by week? How do you determine which volume goes out to which carriers? Because the other things people don't really consider is you want to know how many loads are associated with each of these lanes, right? And that information is going to tell you a hell of a lot more about how this company actually functions, where their business is really moving. And you'll see some of the lanes, like, to be honest, it's important to understand what a bid is in the first place. It's usually just that company's comprehensive list of every lane they shipped last year. But just like every business, right? Some of those customers won't buy orders this year. Some customers will buy orders that weren't on it. So it's not 100% going to play out the way this company even would like it to. So again, asking these questions to understand more about what's going on and how your number is used by your customer is far more important to me than the number I put in. And I'm going to ask them, like, hey, how can I help you? Are there any of these that you're having to deal with that are problems? Some where you got nowhere near the volume of carriers in some areas because they don't want to go there. Let me know. Those are areas where I absolutely can help you better. Again, back to earlier, better than a trucking company can. If a trucking company doesn't want it, they're not just going to send a truck there to keep you happy. As a broker, I will spend the effort to find a carrier domiciled in that area that wants that business that most people don't want, right? That is an opportunity for me to turn this into a real relationship. So again, everything you said and kind of how I go about them.
Yeah, there's always, and it's a kind of a general strategy in freight brokerage and sales is but do go a step further, if not 2-3 steps further than the average person in our industry, right? If the average person's like, I'm just going to throw rates into a rating tool and add 15% and submit it. Don't do that. Do something different.
Yes.
Is that you might be a little bit more strict. Your strategy will help you probably win some of the lanes, but lose them to the idiot who underbid them on other ones, because you have more context as to what really matters on these. So good stuff. Keep sending us your questions. This is the final mile. Ben, any final thoughts here?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills.